it's Walter, right?
Yep. I'll be with you.
Okay.
I'm in the act. So you're talking to the camera, then if I want to do some questions, I'll. You can jump right in. I'm here with Matt from LUMIX. He's the. What do you do? Are you an ambassador? Or you actually
Panasonic. I'm in business development for Panasonic, so business development manager.
kick butt. So I'm not going to be in the. I want to be just hanging out here, but I want Matthew Frazer, Matt to really go into depth about this camera because I'm a Sony user, and why would I want to switch to the Lumix system, especially the new X? And that's why I'm in the dispute for because I'm actually really interested in it. So I'm gonna let Matt, not let. I'm honored to have Matt go overview with this. Also, I do use Condo Blue too, which Matt likes too, I think, right? Especially with
We
the
have some partnerships.
yes, I like that.
So, hi everybody, I'm Matt Frazier with Panasonic, and we're here to talk about the S5M2X. First off, I think the one area that people who do content creation or YouTube work have been concerned with us is in our autofocus system. So we've switched over to using what's called a PDAF, or a hybrid autofocus system. So the autofocus is extremely reliable on the cameras now. And that was the number one thing we wanted to address when we introduced the S5 II. Now that we've got the autofocus out of the way, I know we're at Cine Gear, which means that most of you are more concerned with the cinema features of the product. So let's first start by talking about what it's capable of. So it is a 6K camera. It's also capable of doing open gate recording, which means instead of using a 16:9 capture, if you want to use the entire photo sensor, you can do that in a 3:2 aspect ratio. It's great for anamorphic applications, but also for social media because you can get 2 crops out of that 3:2 ratio image. So you have the ability to crop a 9:16 image and a 16:9 image, and you're gonna have fewer compromises with your deliverable. The camera can do 4K at up to 60 frames per second. The camera is exclusively a 10-bit camera. It's very hard to find any 8-bit options. So even the 6K open gate is a 10-bit option in the camera. 4K 60 is a 10-bit option. And then in terms of post-production considerations, the camera can do ProRes. So a lot of post-production houses would prefer ProRes deliverables. It can do it internally at up to 1080p. Or if you want to add an SSD drive to the camera, we can do 4K or even 5.8K to an SSD as a ProRes file. So one of the cool things with the camera is this ability to use the USB port externally to an external SSD drive. So USB to an SSD drive. And we partnered with Condor Blue to design a handle. They worked with SanDisk on this ProBlade system. And so what you're able to do with this is you're able to, in the handle, install your own SSD and then have this be your landing point for any of your USB file or any of your files. We can accommodate up to a 2 terabyte file with this, or a 2 terabyte SSD with this design. So ProRes can go here, all intercodecs can go here or here. And then for people who want RAW workflows, our cameras can output up to 5.8K RAW in either the ProRes RAW format to Atomos recorders, or we could do Blackmagic RAW, which is what we're showing here right now. There's kind of an extra benefit to this handle when working with the Blackmagic recorders, because if you want, you can just disconnect it from our USB port, and you can connect it into their USB port, and now your ProRes RAW files will end up in the handle instead of having to use the SD card slots that are in this device here. The camera also has a ton of anamorphic functions. So we have the ability to de-squeeze anamorphic video content at 1.30, 1.33, 1.5x anamorphic lenses, 1.8x anamorphic lenses, and obviously 2x anamorphic lenses. But what's more important is we have an in-body stabilization system. So the sensor is literally floating in a magnetic field. The problem is if you do that with an anamorphic lens, we have 5 different axes. You have an up and down, you have up, down, left, right. That's 2 axes. We want that stabilized for anamorphics. But we also have roll. And if it rolls with an anamorphic lens, that's going to create really awful looking video content. So if you tell the camera what the squeeze ratio of the lens is, we will optimize the stabilization for that squeeze ratio. So if you're using a 1.8 anamorphic lens, you set the stabilization to 1.8, it will no longer roll the sensor, and it reduces the pitch and the yaw control as well. So you get really one of the only ways to stabilize anamorphic lenses without using a gimbal or without having to use a Steadicam rig. So a nice way to handhold your footage with anamorphic lenses. Aside from dual record, so we can record to 2 slots at the same time, not to this. So it's either internal,
So you can either do this or that, but not to both.
not to both,
Even different files.
not to both,
So it's either this
or that.
but you don't have it. You don't have to have any cards in it, right?
No, no cards are required here. You can go straight to
This
here.
is technically faster, right?
Much faster. That's why we're able to do ProRes here and not internally. So, yeah, appreciate it. So one of the other things that a lot of people are concerned with these smaller, what production calls DSLR, what I call a mirrorless camera, is thermal management. A lot of these cameras can overheat or run into challenging issues, especially in the sun like we're in today. So this camera actually has a fan system built in. It's in the top. It's actually in the viewfinder, just behind the viewfinder. So air comes right in through the front, and it's expelled out the sides. And by doing this, we've given the camera the ability to record in all frame rates and all resolutions at ambient temperatures up to 104 degrees Fahrenheit. For our friends in Canada, that'd be 40 degrees Celsius. So you end up with an incredibly reliable system that's got cinema quality reliability. The last feature I want to touch base on is something we call real-time LUT. So again, in these cameras, it's unusual to have features like a shutter angle. We give you shutter angle. It's weird to have features like vector scopes and waveform monitors. We give you those. We have synchro scan, so you can do 1 degree adjustment to deal with like flickering LED lights or monitors that are in PAL and you're doing an NTSC project. We can deal with all that stuff. We also have the ability to load LUTs, and you can load up to 10, which some people think that's a lot. That's a lot of LUTs to be able to load into a camera, and they go, well, why would I want to do that? Well, we also offer the ability to bake your LUT into the footage. So if you don't want to use it for monitoring alone, but you'd like it to have a final delivered look, you can bake that LUT in. Most of you are like rolling your eyes because why the hell would I want to do that? Here's why. Let's say you're going to work a project where the primary camera is an ARRI, and it's going to be in log C3. Well, what you can do in Resolve is you can create a transform LUT that converts vlog into log C3, and then you can kick that out as a 33 cube LUT. You can then load that in the camera, and then you're now recording in Aries log space, which means you give your 2 deliverables to post, the Aries shot footage and the Panasonic shot footage, and post only has to work in ARRI. So everything is going to work within the same color space. If you're doing a red project, you can work in red's log space as well. Just kick out that transform from either Baselight or from Resolve, and then you can just load those LUTs right into the camera, and now this effectively is working within red's color space. So we're realistic with our cameras. We know you're not using this as a primary A camera in most applications. So we're a crash camera, we're a B camera, we're a C camera in this case. It's very important that we streamline workflow for post so that our cameras can be approved as the post camera's approved camera for these applications. We really want to be a chameleon camera so that we can match as many different cinema cameras as possible. And real-time LUT gives us that capability. So that mostly, Brett, gives you most of the overflow. Walter, was anything else you want to talk about?
Battery.
So
you're taking up the USB-C with this, right?
correct. So we have an internal battery. So we have internal battery, or in this case, we're using a dummy battery, and then we're using a V-mount solution in this application.
So, how about the new monitor for this? Is there anything new about the monitor?
No, it's the same It's the same monitor we've been using since the GH6. So it's a GH6 viewfinder, GH6 monitor. So
the big thing is the new focusing system. It has the
open gate
SSD. Because the main difference between this and the one that's not the X.
Oh, the difference between those two. So the S5 II versus 2X.
Because only $200.
Yeah, there's $200 price difference. Yeah. So the S5 II, basically. So here's the distinction. S5 II will not have the ability to use the USB port for SSDs. This has a whole slew of streaming features that are not always appropriate for cinema, but one thing we can do with the camera is we can adapt the USB and turn it into an Ethernet port. And when we do that, we can then fully control the camera, including the full menu system of the camera over a network. We can also stream via RTSP or RTMP up to 4K 60p. So it's a phenomenal streaming solution. And if you want to do live streams on USB, I'm sorry, on YouTube, or maybe you want to do a live stream to Facebook Live, we can do the RTMP internally. So you just need a network, even a Wi-Fi network. And when we do that, all you do is you're going to bring in your URL and stream key for your live stream. You just put it into the camera, and then as long as you have a network, you just hit record, and it'll start streaming right from the camera. No need for any computers or other devices. That's exclusive to the X. And then for RAW over HDMI, it's included at no additional charge on the X. If you want RAW over HDMI, the S5 II can add it, but it's a $200 unlock, which is the same price difference as this camera.
Is there any new lenses?
We don't have any new lenses. Kind of. When we announced the S5 II, we announced a 14 to 28 millimeter.
Do the lenses have image stabilization?
Some of our lenses are stabilized. We only need stabilization in the lens once we get to focal lengths over 240 millimeters.
Because the stabilization of the camera is so phenomenal, right?
Exactly.
Does this have the tripod mode? I saw some other guy.
Oh yeah. It's called we call it Boost IS.
Talk about that a little bit.
Honestly speaking, I tried to get him to call it tripod boost.
Some other guy, I saw some guy with another camera, older version. He goes, "Oh, let me show you this tripod mode."
Yeah.
And he was doing this. Does this have?
Yeah.
So it has. Talk about that because that's pretty phenomenal.
Yeah. So aside from being able to optimize stabilization for anamorphic lenses, we have what's recognized to be the best image stabilization, in particular for video applications. It looks very gimbal-like in its application. We offer the ability to crop the sensor a little bit and give you an electronic stabilization. And these both work really well for movement. And as long as you have a lens that's 16 millimeters wide or narrow or tighter, 20 millimeters wide or tighter, it looks exceptionally good with none of the weird sort of warping in the background. But a lot of times when I'm doing, like, if I have to do interview work, I'm doing like a 2-minute interview, not like this crazy thing Walter's got me doing right now. So I just need to be able to hold a camera for a couple minutes. It would literally take me longer to pull the tripod out and set it up than the interview will take. So all I do is I put it into Boost IS mode, and then I just hand hold it, and it behaves exactly like a tripod. And it's fully available even in open gate mode. So yeah, so yeah, I would say between open gate and image stabilization, those are the two most popular functions of the camera, Walter. So
from a Sony guy,
okay,
why would I want to switch to this? Like this elevator speech, like elevator. Why would a guy that's invested in Sony? That you can.
Yeah, I don't necessarily like to.
I do. As a Sony user, I'm actually in this booth because of this camera, and for the most part, I don't. Because I'm not a Sony artisan. For the most part, this camera can do everything that mine can with better stabilization. The focus now is on par, competitive. That was the biggest flaw of this camera, right? And they admitted that, and they fixed it. But the SSD recording can't do that with Sony. Open Gate can't do it with Sony.
And frankly, on top of that, unless you're into like their FX series products, things like shutter angle, waveform monitors.
So no shutter angle on the FX30, no shutter angle on the FX3. You have to be FX60. So
no open gate functions. But on top of that, though, it's really just like the cinema considerations. Those are the things that we do that oftentimes don't make it into the other products. So, when it's not just shutter angle, but it's like anamorphic D-squeeze. I know that it's been added.
Yeah, but they only have 1.5 and 2.
1.3 and 1.33 and 2X.
Yeah, you have it all.
Yeah, everything except for 1.6, and I'm trying to get that fixed. So it's really just, when it comes to cinematography, we're not trying to protect like a flagship line by not including those features in it in the lower end. We really just give you what you want. So that's kind of the way to look at it.
Yeah. So as we all know, you ever see Camera Conspiracies?
Yeah, I know Camera Conspiracies really well. It's still not the perfect camera, but it's close.
But honestly, I don't like it in front of the camera, but I couldn't wait to see this because this was in a glass case at NAB. Then it was, I think, at someplace else you couldn't see it. So from a perspective of a Sony user, this is really, really enticing, especially open gate, shutter angle, SSD recording, black magic interface, built-in LUTs from different that you can simulate from Ori, and you can. So there's from a Sony perspective of a guy that has FX3, FX30, A7R5. This is really enticing for me to spend this much time in a booth with Matt.
And to be clear, Sony can do baked-in LUTs.
Yeah,
Usually going to be in the higher FX series.
you don't have to defend Sony because I spend a lot of money on Sony. So that was very nice to Matt. The camera's phenomenal. Someday I'd like to get my hands on it so I can test it out. And Matt's kindness to spend this much time with us. Thank you, Matt.